Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the most impactful research, the most complex data, and we turn it all into knowledge you can actually use.
And today, we are stepping onto the platform. We're talking about that single moment in competitive weightlifting that can make or break an entire competition.
The opening attempt, the opener.
It's the ultimate high-stakes gamble. It dictates the entire trajectory of the meet. It sets the mental stage, your position, everything.
And for decades, that decision has been more art than science, right?
Yeah.
A coach just. They rely on intuition, on experience, on a gut feeling from the warm-up.
Exactly. But we know that an athlete's one repetition maximum, their 1RM, is so fragile on the day. Mental stress, the crowd, weight cutting, it all plays a part.
And subjectivity is a huge vulnerability when, the difference between a gold medal and coming in fourth is often just 1 kilogram.
Oh, absolutely. Go too heavy on the opener, you fail, and the psychological damage is massive. Go too light, and you've wasted an attempt and maybe even sacrificed a medal.
So that's what we're asking today. Can we replace that gut feeling with hard, objective data? Can we use something called velocity-based approaches, or VBA, to accurately predict that perfect 1RM?
And our mission for this deep dive is to see if these velocity metrics are reliable enough and accurate enough for the most technical lift of all, the snatch.
Okay, and where are we drawing this from?
We are pulling directly from an excellent research article. It's titled, Evaluating Velocity-Based Approaches for Predicting One Repetition Maximum in the Snatch.
And the authors.
It was conducted by Yaxu, Zongwei, Chen, Daniel Marcos-Frutos, and their colleagues. You can find it in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, Volume 25, pages 130-137. It was published online March 1st, 2026.
Great. So they're asking, fundamentally, can bar speed give us the objective answer we need for that opener?
That's the core question.
All right, let's unpack this then. If we're going to talk about bar speed, we need to speak the language of velocity-based training, VBT. And the study, it focused on one specific metric, peak velocity, or PV.
Right, and this is a really critical choice. They used a linear position transducer, the GymAware RS system, specifically to track the bar. And they chose peak velocity over mean velocity for a very good reason.
And what's that? I mean, wouldn't the average speed of the whole lift be a good measure?
You'd think so, but not for the snatch. The snatch is, it's ballistic. It has two very, very distinct ascending phases.
Okay.
You have that first pull, from the floor up to the knee, which is relatively slow and controlled. And then you have that explosive, violent second pull.
That's where all of the power is generated.
All of it. So if you average the velocity over the entire lift, that slow first part just contaminates the data. It completely masks the true power output.
So peak velocity just grabs that one single moment of maximum speed and effort.
That's it. So PV is our metric. Now, the way VBT uses that data to predict the 1RM, it's all based on the load-velocity relationship.
Which is pretty intuitive. The heavier the weight, the slower you lift it.
Exactly. It's an inverse relationship. So for an individual athlete, you have them lift a few lighter weights, you plot those points, and you draw a line through them using linear regression.
And then you just extend that line out until it hits some kind of speed limit.
A speed limit is a great way to put it. It's a predefined minimal velocity threshold, or MVT. Basically, it's the slowest possible speed an athlete can move the bar and still successfully make the lift.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the study looked at two different kinds of MVT. First, there's the old standard, actual MVT.
Right. Actual MVT is exactly what it sounds like. It's the actual observable speed of the bar when an athlete successfully completes their true 1RM in a testing session. You measure it directly.
And then there's the new kid on the block, the optimal MVT.
Yeah, this one is more of a mathematical concept. It was proposed by researchers like García-Ramos. The optimal MVT is a calculated value. It's the velocity that's adjusted to mathematically erase any difference between the predicted 1RM and the actual 1RM in that same session.
So wait, if the model predicts 100 kilos, but the athlete lifts 102, the optimal MVT is basically tweaked until the model's prediction says 102.
That's the idea. And in other lifts, like the squat or bench press, some research suggested this mathematical approach was actually more reliable than just using the one-off actual MVT measurement.
So the big question is, for a lift as dynamic as the snatch, which one actually works? The measured one, the calculated one, or maybe just checking the speed of a single heavy warm-up?
Precisely. Let's look at how they designed the study. The participants were 14 competitive adolescent male weightlifters.
So they were young, but they were experienced, not novices.
No, not at all. Average of about 5 years of training. So they completed 2 testing sessions a week apart to check for reliability.
And what did those sessions look like?
Each time, they did an incremental loading test. Started at 50% of their best snatch, then 70, 80, and 90%. They recorded the peak velocity for each of those, and then they went on to find their actual 1RM for that specific day.
So session 1 gave them all the baseline data, the load velocity curve, the MVTs for each lifter. How'd they use that to predict what would happen in session 2?
They tested two main strategies. The first, used that whole curve from session 1 and combined it with either the actual MVT or the optimal MVT to predict the 1RM in session 2.
Okay, and the second one? That's the more practical one, the one a coach might actually use on meet day.
It is. The second strategy predicted the 1RM based on just a single submaximal lift in session 2. Let's say just their 80% warm-up set. They tested this using the data from the 50, 70, 80, and 90% loads.
Before we even talk about accuracy, we have to know if the data is consistent. I mean, if the bar speed is all over the place, day to day at the same weight, this whole thing is useless. What did they find on reliability?
The reliability was actually very high, which is great news. The lifter's actual 1RM was super consistent between sessions. The coefficient of variation was only about 2.16%.
So the athletes were solid. They weren't having wildly different strength days.
Correct. And critically, all the peak velocities they measured, from 50% all the way up to 90%, showed acceptable reliability. The speed at 80% of 1RM was especially stable, with a CV of just 1.82%.
That's really, really consistent for a movement as technical as the snatch. What about the MVTs themselves? Were they reliable?
Both were, yes. But here's where we see the first big insight specific to the snatch. We mentioned that in other exercises, the optimal MVT was often more reliable.
Right. And was it here?
No. In the snatch, the optimal MVT showed only similar reliability to the actual MVT. The CVs were 3.31% and 2.61% respectively. They were basically in the same ballpark.
So that mathematical trick that worked for a simple squat just didn't really offer any advantage for a complex ballistic lift like this.
It's a huge takeaway. You can't just copy and paste these VBT assumptions from one lift to another.
Okay, so let's get to the main event, accuracy. How close did the predictions get to the real 1RM in session 2? Because for this to be useful, it's got to be within a couple of kilos, right?
Absolutely. And, a few of the methods did perform acceptably well. The two MVT methods and the predictions using the heavier loads, 80 and 90%, all had errors between about 2.6 and 4.1 kilograms.
That's reasonably tight. So using those heavy warm-ups, the ones closer to maximum, that seems to work okay.
It does, but the lighter loads, the ones a coach might want to use to save the athlete's energy.
What happened there?
It was a total disaster.
Yeah.
The prediction error when using the 50% load was almost 10 kilograms, 9.9 kilograms to be exact, and it was still over 6 kilos off at 70%.
Whoa, 10 kilos off. In a sport that's decided by 1 kilo, that is completely unusable.
Absolutely. It just hammers home the point that your predictive accuracy plummets the further you get from that maximal effort load.
So for day-to-day training, the researchers suggested that using the 80% load was probably the sweet spot. Good reliability, decent accuracy, and you're not crushing your athlete.
Exactly. It's a practical monitoring tool.
Okay, but this is where the story, for me, completely changes. This is the big twist. Because despite those acceptably low errors of 2 to 4 kilos, the study found these massive statistical biases that really call the whole thing into question for high-level competition.
Let's talk about proportional bias.
This is the aha moment. This is the crucial caveat. Because the most accurate methods, the MVTs, the 80%, the 90%, they all showed significant proportional bias.
Okay, explain that in simple terms. If I'm a coach standing there, what does that mean for my athletes?
It means your prediction model is systematically wrong for the people at the ends of the spectrum. In this study, the model tended to overestimate the 1RM for the strongest lifters and underestimate it for the weaker ones.
Hold on. So if I'm coaching my top elite athlete, the model is telling me they can lift more than they actually can.
That's exactly right. The data might say your star lifter is good for 102 kilograms, but really they only have 100 kilograms in the tank that day. If you pick that opener based on the velocity data, you are setting them up to fail. That's a catastrophic flaw. And it gets worse, doesn't it? There was another issue. Heteroscedasticity. It's a mouthful.
It is, but the concept is pretty straightforward. It just means that the spread of the prediction errors gets bigger as the athlete gets stronger.
So like aiming at a target. For a weaker lifter, the predictions might be off by a bit, but they're all clustered together.
Exactly. But for your elite lifter, the average error might be 3 kilograms, but the individual predictions could be scattered all over the place. the model becomes less precise.
So the data is not only biased against your strongest athletes, it's also the least consistent for them.
That's what the data implies for the actual MVT and 90% methods. The precision just erodes as you get to that elite level where you need it most.
It seems like it fundamentally limits this as a standalone tool for competition.
It does. And beyond the stats, the authors also pointed out that bar speed is just one piece of a very complex puzzle. You can have great bar speed but still miss a snatch because of technique.
Right? Things like how much the bar drifts forward or the speed of the turnover under the bar.
All of that. VBA, in its current form, just ignores that crucial technique data.
And there were some important limitations to the study itself that we should mention.
Yes, definitely. For one, all this testing was done in the off-season. Competition day is a different beast. You've got adrenaline, massive stress, fatigue from cutting weight.
All things that could totally change an athlete's MVT on the day, making the training data useless.
Precisely. And the study was only on adolescent males. We know from other research that female lifters can have different load velocity profiles, so you can't just apply this universally.
And even the rest periods they used might have introduced fatigue, making the results more like a training 1RM than a true rested competition 1RM.
A very fair point.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. For the coach on the platform, what does this all mean? The data is consistent, the average error is kind of low, but these statistical biases are a huge red flag.
We have to be really clear here. Because of that proportional bias and the random errors, a coach simply cannot use VBA as their sole source of truth. It's especially dangerous for your strongest and your weakest lifters.
So the final takeaway seems to be that recording peak velocity in your warm-ups is a fantastic complementary variable.
That's the perfect term for it. It gives you objective data to support and refine your own experience as a coach. But it should never, ever override that experience, especially when a medal is on the line.
You're blending the data with the human element, the coach's eye for technique and mental state.
That's where the real informed decision comes from.
Which, that brings us to the next big research question. The ultimate test would be to actually compare the success rates. A group using just subjective coaching versus a group where the coach's decision is actively informed by this real-time velocity data.
That real-world validation is the final piece of the puzzle. That's how this moves from just a monitoring tool to a genuine competition strategy.
A really fantastic deep dive into the limits of quantifying strength. For those of you who want to get into the nitty-gritty of the statistical models and see the data for yourself, we really encourage you to read the full article by Yaxu and his colleagues.
We've given you the key insights, but the full picture is always there in the source material.
And if you found this valuable, please make sure you follow the channel and turn on your notifications. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the research that helps you get better informed, faster. We'll see